Hello and welcome back to another edition of Prodigy Talks. I'm Rob Lawrence and we are here right now in Austin, Texas at NAEMSP, National Association of EMS Physicians, and we're going to talk to the great folk from the National Registry. And first of all, and the posters that you are presenting. So, Christopher Gage, how are you doing?
Good, how are you doing?
So let everybody know what you do within the National Registry.
So I'm an EMS research fellow for the National Registry EMTs. I'm also a PhD student at Ohio State University.
And so what is the first poster we've got today?
So the first poster we have is on satisfaction with EMS clinicians. We know that EMS clinicians leave and there's a problem in the workforce. We know that satisfaction is associated with EMS clinicians leaving the workforce. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to do an assessment and look at the association with the different dimensions of a validated survey, specifically for job satisfaction. So what we found out after using lasso regression, evaluating about over 30,000 EMS clinicians, is that on the left side of the red line here, we noticed that those that are satisfied with supervisors, promotion, rewards, work, and pay actually stay in EMS longer. And so that's the biggest finding of our study.
And I think that's great that you've identified those things. That's clearly the biggest takeaway. These are the reasons that people are leaving. Interestingly, we saw EMS1 did the What Paramedics Want survey where, you know, the random selection of folk that answered came up with the same conclusion. Clearly, this is academic and peer reviewed. Yes. And so you approve that message then?
Oh, most definitely. We feel like that agencies that really want to help with their EMS clinician retention really need to focus on these areas to keep them around longer.
Okay, so takeaway number one is these are the reasons why leaving. And of course, if you can address that, then retention will be aided. So let's move on round and go and talk to John. John, again, is from the National Registry. So John, introduce yourself. Who are you and where do you fit into the amazing scheme of things at the National Registry?
Yeah, so my name is Jonathan Powell, and I'm an EMS Research Fellow at the National Registry of EMTs. Also a PhD Epidemiology Fellow at the Ohio State University.
Is the important?
It's very important. It's drilled into you in orientation before you actually start your classes.
Okay, this is brought to you by the Prodigy, by the way. Carry on.
Yeah, so in this work, we recognize at the National Registry that EMS clinician turnover is a hot topic and an issue that needs to be addressed to support the EMS agencies that are doing important work in the communities. So what we wanted to do is get past just a raw level of turnover where you look at who leaves and adjust for agency-specific characteristics, state of origin, and other things that we think are impactful on the decision to leave EMS. So what we found is that agency-specific characteristics are absolutely important and a part of the decision to leave EMS. Now, in contrast to Chris's work, which looked at the intent to leave EMS, we were able to leverage recertification data to look at those that actually lapse that National Registry certification in states where certification is required for continuing licensure. So what we found is that fire agencies left at a lower rate than any of the other agencies. And if we don't adjust for those types of things that we're finding in our data, then the numbers that we're seeing and giving to the community in order to make those decisions that impact people every day aren't correct. And so we want to make sure that we apply a systematic and peer-reviewed process to this information and then take it to areas like NAEMSP so that we can put it in front of scientists who can poke holes in it and help us understand the right way to measure this question, because it's incredibly important and we don't want to get it wrong.
Firstly, I think NAEMSP, the amount of poster presentations here this year have been absolutely phenomenal. But of course, you just hit the nail on the head there to take the peer-reviewed academic data to the scientists to allow them to poke holes into it. I also think it's important that this information, particularly about workforce, is going up to the federal bodies, whether it's NHTSA, whether it's NEMSAC, whether it's FICAMS, in order to have them understand the state we're in, and of course have them then help us with things like reimbursement, with things like training grants, and other initiatives to help us get back to where we need to be. So this is vitally important work, I think.
Thank you, and I agree with you. It's work that we want to apply at all levels of government and all levels of agency attachment and catchment, because we want to make sure that the people who are making these decisions have the data in their hands, and we're not telling them necessarily this is the answer. We're saying this is one way to look at the question. There are a number of other national organizations and researchers tackling the same question, and it's a totality of the evidence and those individual decision makers taking that information and deciding what's best for their individual community, and we're just excited to be a part of that process.
Okay, the bottom line up front question, what's the biggest takeaway?
Bottom line is that EMS turnover and workforce issues, they're a wicked problem. They're something that is difficult to solve, but that doesn't mean that we're not up to the challenge.
Excellent. John, thank you very much.
You,
let's move on again.
Okay, so this is actually a clinical paper. What we wanted to do is we wanted to look at the proportion of advanced airways used in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest for adults. So we went to the NIPSIS website and the record data set, and we wanted to evaluate from 2013 to 2022 and just look at the airway proportions used over time. And what we found out is that initially about 26%, this is the number of airways being used per patient. So it goes from 26% to 35%. So there's about a 10% increase in the proportions of all advanced airways used per patient over time. We also found out that even though we thought that SGA usage had increased significantly more, that actually ETI is still the dominant airway used in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest now.
Okay, standard question now. What's the biggest takeaway?
So the biggest takeaway is even though SGA use has increased a lot, ETI is still very important out of hospital cardiac arrest. And so agencies need to focus on the training for both for all of their clinicians and make sure they're doing the best to the patient that needs it.
So I have to tell everybody, I'm a huge NEPSIS fan, okay, because they've got 50 million plus records out there that you can get a license for, and you can interrogate and do the research, which I think is absolutely amazing. And I think that's underutilized.
Yep, most definitely. 53 million in 2022.
So that was a quick tour around the amazing posters from the National Registry. Remember that they are a source of academic output. Thank you very much, Chris and John, for joining me today. This has been Prodigy Talks. I've been Rob Lawrence, and as we always say, back to you.